After a blowout loss to the Jazz on Saturday, the Heat might have a problem with the rotation, but without Jimmy Butler, can they find a solution? We'll debate that and look at the latest news regarding Butler's trade request on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're watching on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Erik Spoelstra's questionable decision when it comes to the starting lineup, plus get to the latest on the Jimmy Butler trade front. But, David, if that was the first game of the post-Jimmy Butler era, not off to a great start. The Heat get blown out by the Jazz on Saturday night. And I think the easy hot take coming from that game is this is why you can't trade Jimmy. You need Jimmy Butler. I'm sure Jimmy Butler was maybe perhaps even enjoying the fact that they got blown out by one of the worst teams in the NBA on Saturday night. That would be the easy hot take, but I do think that it's missing nuance if that's the takeaway. I think that this team was physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. Physically exhausted, their third game in 4 nights. Mentally and emotionally exhausted for everything that they've had to deal with over this past week. And so the fact that they would stumble, regardless of the opponent, isn't surprising. And that doesn't mean to excuse the loss necessarily, but I am going to withhold judgment. It felt really bad in the moment, but kind of sleeping on it and talking with you about it now, it's like, okay, let's not jump to the hottest of the hot takes right away.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It was demoralizing. I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, man, this team kind of stink. They just couldn't seem to muster anything. Utah was dominant offensively, which is not something that you equate with the Utah Jazz typically. Aside from that, they just didn't seem to have any kind of desire to be there. They weren't putting up much of a fight. They weren't challenging Utah. It was a tie game after the first quarter, and then they blow them out in the second quarter, and things get even worse in the third. And by that point, they're already dead. And so there's not much left to do but kind of throw all the two-way guys out there and see what you might be able to get from them. Give Kel'el Ware some extended minutes, etc. So it was an ugly loss. But I'm with you. I think a lot of that had to do with the emotional drain. I really do. I know we kind of had dismissed it in some regard. Although, again, from what you experienced in the locker room the night that Jimmy made his trade request and kind of dealing with that. You're kind of going through shock. Things are bad. And obviously, whatever we see publicly, even as media members, and certainly what fans see publicly is far less than what goes on behind the scenes. And so the Heat players themselves had to have known that there were some problems between Jimmy and the front office. But then the trade request and the press conference and everything comes out within a matter of an hour following a loss to the Indiana Pacers on Thursday. And it's not hard to kind of just feel hungover and caught up in the moment. It was a pretty bad one. And so I think the next day you're probably processing that and you're like, oh man, I can't believe it. Think about it. Jimmy, for all of his warts, I think was beloved in that locker room. And I think he was well appreciated. And certainly he was a great teammate and a great player. And coming to the realization that he's no longer going to be a part of the franchise has to stink. And you're kind of caught in between. This is watching mommy and daddy get a divorce. And you're kind of dealing with this and having to process it. And so I think they probably were just sleepwalking through the Utah game, kind of looking forward to the next step one way or the other. But I'm also cautiously optimistic, and maybe I should save that for a little bit. But given the fact that they're going to go on this road trip, we've heard of these experiences before, and this is a great opportunity for Bam Adebayo, who I know we'll talk about, and a really subpar performance against the Jazz. But this is a really great opportunity for him as the captain of the team, perhaps the emotional leader of the team moving forward, to create a real bonding experience. Because that's a lot of what these road trips can become, is that you can just form a bond. It's like you're on the road together. It's 15 and the coaching staff against everybody because you're traveling from city to city. You're traveling against facing against all these different teams. For me, it would be great for them to take a day off, go catch a movie together, go bowling, organize like a team activity
Bowling.
somewhere down the road. Yeah, something we've heard of these things.
I know, but you don't want to go bowling because then the germs in the bowling ball, and you don't want anybody to get sick, and then they can't play in these games.
This feels like your own personal issue. This is a kiss cam kind of / anti-bowling rant waiting to happen. I didn't realize that you felt
I'm
that
coming
way.
out as a germaphobe on this show here. No, but you're right, and so they're again third game in 4 nights. All these home games. Jimmy Butler's locker is still with his stuff in it. He's still a part of this team, right? His shoes, his jersey were in the locker on Saturday night. Like there is no escaping the situation for what it is. And, Erik Spoelstra can come out and say, I'm not gonna talk about the whole situation. I'm not one of those clickbait coaches. And it's like, and I respect it. And I understand that he's trying to keep the focus on the basketball game. This isn't clickbait. This is real life. This is what this team is dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And sure, the outside noise and the questions from the media and everything don't help, but it's not. I don't think that that's really what this team is feeling. This team is feeling what you were talking about. The guy who was leading them for so many years no longer even wants to be a part of that team. That's what this team is feeling. And so, but to your point, I think you go on the road, you get away from your own locker room. We have seen this team really thrive in these kind of circumstances on these long road trips, right? Like you get away for 4 or 5 games and you're able to just sort of put your head in the sand and focus on basketball. And this team does thrive in exactly that scenario. And this trip could not be coming at a better time for this team where they could just get away from Jimmy Butler's locker. Jimmy Butler's not going to be with the team. They say, okay, this is our group. Perhaps we won't go bowling, but maybe we'll go see a movie and we're going to do it all together, right? And
team dinner, you know what I meant, like a team function.
I know what you meant. Yes, of course. But
that's not to say that they're going to win on this road trip either. Like that is a challenging road trip, but you can still take some positive steps as far as building an emotional foundation, a base for you to continue to build off for the rest of the season. Because you might not win games because unfortunately they're just at a talent deficit. They've been at a talent deficit even when Jimmy was on the roster. Without him, they're certainly there. But at the very least, you can show some kind of emotional spark and bond and the power of friendship or whatever you want to call it. Maybe that's a little too simplistic or cliche, but I think you can start to build that and start working off that and be like, you know what? We are just the 13, 14 guys that are left in the locker room. That's us. That's who we are right now. It doesn't matter. Let's focus on being together, supporting one another, and finding a way to try and create as many victories as possible.
I mean, they lost 2 games in a row from whatever the opposite of the power of friendship is, right?
Yeah.
They lost that Indiana Pacers no-show was a disaster, right? And they were just sort of dealing like they were barely playing the Indiana Pacers in that game. It felt like more that they're playing Jimmy Butler. Like they were like, what's going on here? And even in that New Orleans game, it felt a little bit like that. And certainly in that Utah game, it was just like they were not prepared for that game mentally. And again, it's not to make excuses for these guys. Like they're paid to go play the sport, but there are reasons for things. And that kind of brings me to Bam here. Bam Adebayo in that game, 4 points, 0 made field goals. One of the worst games of his career. No question about it. And it was in a big moment. And there was a moment where he could have stepped up and said, I'm the captain now. It's my team. Don't worry, guys. I'm gonna rally the troops, steady the ship, any other cliche metaphor you want to use. And I got you. As the captain of this team, as the new star of this team, I got you. We're gonna be okay. And he kind of felt like the opposite of that. But again, not making an excuse, but trying to find reasons for stuff. Because there's a reason why he misses all 6 of his field goal attempts, right?
Yeah.
And I think
he was forcing it. Yeah. No, I think he was forcing it a little bit.
If you think about exactly what I was just talking about with the physical, the mental, and the emotional toll, nobody has dealt with more of that over the last 2 years than Bam Adebayo has. Every issue that happens in the Miami Heat organization somehow ends up trickling down to Bam. And Bam's the one who has to either perform or answer to whatever that issue is. If Jimmy Butler is a no-show in a game, it's Bam who has to suddenly become the offensive fulcrum of the offense. And this is, again, going over the last 2 years when Jimmy Butler just wasn't engaged for half of the games last season. When the offense just stalls, it's Bam who is asked, why aren't you scoring 25 points per game? when the team is undersized because the front office hasn't surrounded him with bigger players, it's him who has to play bigger. When that offense stalls, it's him who has to anchor a top 10 defense with, frankly, talent that doesn't look like a top 10 defensive talent. The only reason the Heat have ever been good defensively is because of Bam and Erik Spoelstra and his zone defense. When Jimmy Butler demands a trade, it's Bam who has to answer the questions from the media about the trade request. Everything that happens goes to Bam. And it was just a hell of a week for that guy. And he no-shows in that Utah Jazz game. And again, he's a star player, and this is what comes with the territory. But he's not that bad, and there's reasons for performances like that, and that's the reason why that happened. And so this dude needs a break, man. So
he's human. He's human. Like we can't disregard that. Like for everything else, like you want to point to obvious faults in his offensive repertoire or anything else like that. Sure, I get it. There have been questions regarding what he can do and what kind of player he is, whether he's just a glorified role player, whether he's a star, whatever. He's giving it his all, and unfortunately, it's just not enough sometimes. And above all that, he is human. And like you said, I'm glad you pointed it out because he is dealing with a lot, and maybe fans don't even want to hear that. And I totally understand that perspective, but you also have to have a little bit of empathy. You
exactly. Well said. Yes, it's you gotta have empathy for this guy. What he's been dealing with lately. But look, the other reason why the Heat lost, Erik Spoelstra's starting lineup decision. I think it was the wrong one. I think there's obviously a better one that he should be using. We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season is heating up, no pun intended, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with PrizePicks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, PrizePicks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Think LeBron's going to drop 30 points? Maybe Luka, once he comes back from injury, is getting more than 8 assists. Well, PrizePicks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I've been using PrizePicks before. Let me tell you, it's a lot of fun, really easy to use, and you can still double your money when you get really when you hit that nice option. It's really convenient. Sometimes as quick as 15 minutes. It's the best way to keep the game exciting. Now the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team now has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. Erik Spoelstra surprisingly used a new starting lineup in this game, which I thought was a wrench that wasn't necessarily needed. We've seen what he's done without Jimmy Butler in games before. He just sort of slides Jaime Jaquez Jr. into that spot and kind of keeps things going. But he used the new one. Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Haywood Highsmith, Nikola Jovic, and Bam Adebayo. It was Rozier's first start basically since outside of injury concerns since he got benched after 12 games. Jovic, his first start minus injuries since he got benched after 9 games. And it didn't work. And I understood the logic behind it, right? No Jimmy Butler. You want a little bit more shot creation on the ball. Let's put Terry Rozier in there. Okay, well, we got Rozier next to Tyler Hero instead of Duncan Robinson next to Tyler Hero. We need to add some size, especially against Utah, who run a little bit bigger in their lineups. Let's throw Jovic in there, slide Highsmith up, and now we have another front court player on the court to start this game. So I understood Spo's logic, but I still hated it as soon as I saw that starting lineup come out half an hour before the tip. That lineup doesn't do anything at a high level. Like I don't know what that lineup does at a high level. It's not overly big. It's not super small. It's not very skilled. It doesn't have great shooting. It doesn't have great defense. It felt like the most blah option available. And they actually came out in that game though, David, and outscored Utah by 5 points in their first stint, but they got outscored by 5. They got outscored by 5 points in total for the game. I didn't like it. I think they got to go in a different direction. What about you?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think when you have Haywood Highsmith out there, who you're not really concerned with what he can do in terms of his offense, and when you know that Terry Rozier is basically going to be inconsistent one way or the other. He could get hot at one point, but yesterday certainly he did not. And you're not too concerned about that. And Niko Jovic, although he was okay, and he got a nice start. I think he had like 7 of the first 10 points or something like that. He was off to a really good start. But I think it allows you to key in defensively on trying to limit what Bam and Tyler specifically can do. And I think that's the whole problem, is that now you all of a sudden you're not worried about 3/5 of the starting lineup. It's like, okay, well, let's just shut down Tyler Hero, because we know that they're only going to go as far as he can carry them if he can have another all-star level performance. And that being the case yesterday, that's exactly what happened. They basically limited Tyler. They weren't too concerned about anybody else in that starting lineup. And Bam, unfortunately, was missing his shots early, only wound up taking 6 field goals. But, that was a really ugly start there. And I don't know why Spo got a little too cutesy with trying to tweak the lineup.
Yeah.
Like, again, to your point, like maybe you could see some kind of rationale behind it, but I don't know why, considering what Duncan does and how essential it is for him and the floor spacing that he brings to the table, to allow Tyler to work a little bit more freely, because you have to at least respect Duncan's ability to light it up from the perimeter. I don't know why you take him out and not just insert Jaime Jaquez Jr., who is in many ways similar to Jimmy in terms of how he attacks the basket and things of that sort. He doesn't command the same kind of respect.
Well, he's been struggling. He's been struggling. So I understand not starting him, but look,
Terry isn't. Terry isn't struggling.
No, you're right, but getting the on ball. I'm not defending it because I was against it, but I understand where Spo is coming from, and he's like, we need more on ball creation. And Duncan Robinson, and as much as he dribbles now, he's not really like an on ball creator necessarily. And I don't think they want Tyler being the point guard of this team. We've heard that they were trying to make Jimmy the point guard of the team. Jimmy obviously didn't appreciate that. You put Terry Rozier out there, and I'm more like, just let Tyler Hero be the point guard. Like, who needs a point guard? Like, why are we still obsessed with this idea of somebody running the offense? Just let Bam do it. Let Tyler do it. Do it by committee, right? And that's why I think even if you had Jaime in there, to your point, like, he could do a little bit of on-ball stuff too. Here's where I'm coming down. I don't even want to dance around the issue anymore. I was wondering if with Jimmy Butler out, because here's the part. What I'm about to say does not imply that the Heat are better without Jimmy Butler. They are clearly better with Jimmy Butler. But without having him in the lineup, it opens the door to add another non-floor spacer to that starting lineup. Because in today's NBA, you can't have more than 2 non-floor spacers. Jimmy and Bam are your non-floor spacers. And when that's your starting lineup, the other 3 guys have to shoot the ball. They got to be able to shoot the ball and space the floor. And we have been clamoring to see Kel'el Ware and Bam Adebayo. We in sort of a collective Miami Heat fan base.
Sure.
Although you and I think have been appropriately kind of cautious with it. And the reason why is because, yes, we know Kel'el Ware can theoretically shoot the 3, and certainly he's willing. And there's been moments even this season where he's able to shoot that 3 ball. Defenses aren't going to care. They're not going to defend him out there. There's a difference between being able to make 3s and being a floor spacer. Floor spacing is the attention that you draw. That's why Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson are so valuable as that backcourt, because not only can they make the 3s, but you have to defend them 25 feet away from the basket, which creates space for everybody else in the paint. And so now, without Jimmy in there, you could play Kel'el Ware in that starting lineup. And if it's Bam and Kel'el as that starting front court, now you at least have size. Those other 3 starters got to be able to shoot the ball. No question. It's still the same situation. But at least you have a little bit of size here. And that lineup that everybody's wanted to see without Jimmy Butler now becomes possible. And so I would love to see it. I would love to see it. I'm ready. Kel'el Ware, Bam Adebayo, Nikola Jovic at small forward. And now you're running super big. What?
I thought we debunked that. I mean,
why?
With Kevin Love, because Kevin Love is not a serviceable backup center, and you don't have anybody else on the roster.
I was watching Cleveland the other day, and I was paying attention to their rotations. Cleveland Cavaliers. Have you heard of them? Number 1 team in the Eastern Conference.
Pretty good. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. That's their starting bigs, right? I mean,
it's their only bigs that they use.
Yeah.
They don't have a backup center. They always have one of them on the floor.
Yeah.
They run big with Dean Wade at the 3 as the starting lineup. It's Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. And when Evan Mobley comes out, Dean Wade slides down to the 4. And they have like Karis LeVert or Isaac Okoro, whoever else comes in and slides in at the 3. And when Jared Allen then goes out, or when Evan Mobley goes out, however I did it. The other one just slides over. They play all 48 minutes with those two guys toggling at center. They never play a backup 5 unless there's injuries or foul trouble or something like that. And so that is possible if you're the Heat. You start Bam at the 4, Nico at the 3, Kel'el at the 5. Bam comes out at the 6-minute mark. Nico slides down to the 4. You've got Nico and Ware. That lineup we have seen play well as a second unit already. Yeah. Like, just do that. No backup center. And then look, if you need to use Kevin Love in a pinch because of an injury or foul trouble, there's worse options. So I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Lean big, go big, give me the size, and then play Tyler and Duncan out there for the shooting. Or you can even play Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero out there. I'm not concerned because you have a huge back line. You got a ton of size across the board, and there's enough shot creation there. I don't know. I'm ready for it.
I agree. I think it's something that they're ramping up towards because we talked about his minutes restriction. And I think we've slowly seen an uptick in terms of how much playing time he gets. And that being the case, I think they're kind of trying to see, like, look, you look at Cavs tonight. Jared Allen only played 28 minutes, but that's still 6 minutes more than what Kel'el played in a blowout loss when he probably got more playing time than he normally would. He played only 22 minutes against the Jazz on Saturday. So Mobley plays 30-plus minutes a game. Allen could probably play about 28 to 30-something minutes, depending on what whether he's in foul trouble or not. They still have Tristan Thompson. He's kind of their ersatz Kevin Love in the sense of like he's a break glass in case of emergency sort of option. But it still works. But yeah, I think you can come to that reality, and I think we're starting to see it. I wouldn't be surprised because we've seen Spo do this in the past too, where it's like, you know what, away from home, we're kind of toying around. You have nothing else to lose in a 6-game road trip. It's challenging enough as it is. Let's give it a shot. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see that starting lineup at some point in the 6-game road trip.
So Spo said that that he's not married to that starting lineup, that he's going to go kind of match up. That he basically said we're going to experiment over these next few games.
Good. Yeah. Good.
At Sacramento on Monday night, at Golden State, at Utah, at Portland, at the LA Clippers, and then at the Los Angeles Lakers. That's the 6-game trip coming up. I could see them even going with it in Sacramento to get Bam off of Sabonis and maybe overwhelm Sacramento with a little bit of size there. I could see them. I think that works in terms of the matchup when we talk about the Bear Ware, et cetera lineup. Golden State, they go a little bit smaller. Do you try to trump card them with go bigger? Do you try to match up with them and by going smaller? I think they have options. One thing I know is I hated that lineup that they used against the Utah Jazz. So, and I can't imagine that Spo loved it all that much either. But we also talked about why, there's plenty of reasons why they would have struggled. So maybe they do give it another look. That wouldn't shock me either, although I would be a little disappointed. When it comes to Jimmy Butler, we learned that the Heat are looking for what the Heat specifically are looking for in a trade. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Unfortunately, the Dolphins won't be there because right now new customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit the website and share betting lines around your team or league, especially if you want to. Well, I don't know. Maybe you want to place a little wager in Kel'el Ware and having a productive night over the 6-game road trip because he might get that start. Maybe Jaime Jaquez
over 0 rebounds.
Just visit FanDuel.com and join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Check out the Locked On Heat Insider community on our subtext messaging platform. Now is the perfect time to get in, as this Jimmy Butler news is everywhere, and the reporting is a lot. And the best way to keep up with it, just join the Locked On Heat Insider community. You can find it with the link in the show notes. It's free for 14 days. It goes to $4.99 a month after that. You can cancel it anytime. But we are sending out all the updates that we are hearing from the national reporters. So you don't have to go looking for all the rumors, all the reports, all the latest on Jimmy Butler. We give it to you right there. And then obviously we react to it here on the show. And the latest on Jimmy Butler is, according to Mark Stein, the Heat are looking to take back as little guaranteed money beyond this season as possible. And that's because, and because of that, there is skepticism around the league that a trade is going to happen anytime soon. This part is not surprising. I think the Heat are active and engaged. Brian Windhorst talked about this over the weekend on ESPN. They are making calls. The Heat are making calls, which is very different than receiving calls, which is what they have said that they are doing. The Heat are making calls. They're receiving calls. They're on calls. There's calls are happening. Phone calls are happening. I think, and I appreciate that. I do wonder what the Heat will ultimately settle for, because there is a tangible sense of desperation to move on from Jimmy Butler. And I understand that. Being in that locker room, you have to get rid of this. You have to get rid of the situation. You have to move on.
So
the Heat are not looking.
Why do you think it's not going to happen anytime soon? Because
that was Mark Stein saying. But
yeah, I know. But why does I know?
I don't know where he's out there. I just don't know the trade. What's the trade?
You're right.
That's the part I keep coming back to. Even if all they're asking for is salary cap space, what's the trade?
You used a crucial word there, though, and that's where it's going to hinge on. They're going to settle. They're going to get pennies on the dollar. They're not going to get the kind of return. Like, I was talking to somebody at a bar yesterday, and they were talking about, maybe you can get a star back. It's like, nope, no star coming, no elite draft pick coming. No, it's a combination of salary and serviceable players, and maybe you can get something of value that you can use for a trade down the road. But to me, the indicator here is that they're making calls, which means they're actively shopping because they want to get this done. And they've basically given themselves a 2-week window in the 7-game suspension, knowing that already the Players Association has filed a grievance, that although it's a lengthy process, at some point they're going to have to force rescind it or chastise a team or tell them, no, you can't do that, or something's going to happen.
Miami doesn't care about that.
Yeah, Miami doesn't care. They want to get this done. Jimmy Butler will never play for the Miami Heat again. He will never wear the Heat uniform again.
Correct.
They're going to find something before the suspension ends.
Or they got to suspend him again.
Still detrimental to the team.
Yeah, you're still being detrimental. I don't. He did this other thing we didn't appreciate. Yeah, but you're right.
Like his Instagram. We don't like his Instagram posts. His choice of music.
You're playing dominoes while in the locker room again while we're away. Detrimental. You're setting up a fake soccer game in the practice court while we're on the road. Detrimental.
Yeah.
Look,
they need ago that was happening. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there, but a week ago, he was recovering and still using the facilities and everything else like that. He was totally
I don't think the Heat appreciated that. They are going to have to settle here. And even if they settle, I just don't know the team. If you're Mark Stein, going back to why are you taking why that's what you're looking for, less money, not long-term money. And I want to point this out. I think that yes, you want to maintain flexibility for this summer for 2025. I think you really need to maintain flexibility for 2026. Right? There's only so much you're going to be able to do this summer. The free agent class isn't awesome. Whatever. In 2026, that's when Luka Doncic could be a free agent, De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Durant. There's a lot of better free agents in 2026, potentially, as long as those guys don't sign extensions or beforehand. And if you're Miami, you got to make sure you're not only flexible in 2025, but I think they're looking at 2026. Because Terry Rozier's contract will be off the books by then. Duncan Robinson's contract could be off the books by then. They will have max cap space in 2026. It's hard for them to open up, nearly impossible for them to open up max cap space in 2025. So that's just part of it. And when you look at not taking long-term salary back, that's what Miami's thinking about. So when you look at a guy like Andrew Wiggins, Michael Porter Jr., Desmond Bane, these are all contracts going beyond 2026. And so it's just something to think about. That's all I'm saying. And I think it's something that the Heat are thinking about. Now, we already got a report from The Athletic that the Warriors are pulling back on their Jimmy Butler interest, which I understand.
Now, with Kuminga's injury, though, does that change things?
Maybe. But also, if you're Miami, it's like, I don't know that Kuminga is ever going to be part of that deal, but no, it's a fair point. We'll see. TBD, right? And teams can posture this way, and they can mean it this way. Like they can say, we're not interested in a Jimmy Butler trade right now, but things happen, such as an injury to a key player, and in 2 weeks, maybe you're a little bit more interested in Jimmy Butler trade. So there's that. Memphis is rising up the odds boards by sports books, which is very interesting because nobody has come out and reported that Memphis has any interest in Jimmy Butler. But we have seen now over multiple sports books, the Grizzlies odds move up. Just something to keep an eye on. Brian Windhorst fingers up in the air. Just, what's going on with that? The point I want to make, though, David, is if you have to settle, so what? Sunk cost. This is the risk you take when you don't trade him in the summer. Not even necessarily saying that they should have, but when you make the decision that you don't trade him in the summer, and when you don't trade him in early December because you didn't like the offers that were out there, and you string it along, this is what happens. This is the risk reward, right? The reward was Jimmy's happy. He plays well. We make the playoffs, maybe make a little bit of a noise in the postseason. That's the reward. The risk is exactly what happened. Well, that's the scenario that played out. Maybe in some other galaxies and different universes, the other way works out. But in this universe, the one we live in now, this is what happened. And here, but I think about the original trade that brought Jimmy to Miami. When we talk about settling, the Heat got Jimmy Butler for Hassan Whiteside, Josh Richardson, and a first-round pick, a protected first. Then they went to 2 finals, 3 Eastern Conference finals. If you get something similar for him back as Whiteside, Richardson, and a protected first 5 years later, that's an amazing return on investment. That's like buying Apple stock in 1987, having it appreciate and go all the way up, being a multimillionaire Forrest Gump style, spending all that money, sailing the world on yachts, 5-star hotels, eating lobster every single night, having going to whatever concert you want, amazing times, caviar for breakfast, and then selling all, and then being out of that stock in 2025, and you're right back to your initial investment that you spent on that original share of Apple stock. That'd be a fun time. And that's kind of what it felt like the Heat just did. We got in low on this penny stock. It appreciated beyond our wildest dreams. We had the time of our life for 5-ish years. And if you could get something back that's just Hassan Whiteside, Josh Richardson, and a protected first, you come away with it with a win, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was prepared for him to just walk away in the summer because I thought he was going to opt out and they were going to match him. They were going to be like, well, thank you for your service. And, thanks for a great playoff run this past year. But I didn't think they were going to trade him. So certainly we got, some pseudo confirmation of that from Pat. And that was the way it was trending. But even at the start of the year, when they hadn't traded him over the summer, it's because they were going to keep him, because I didn't think his value was going to increase necessarily over the course of the season. They were going to find somebody desperate enough by February to put together this monster trade package that they would have to accept or be forced to. So it all seemed like it was trending towards he was going to be leaving for nothing, and he would give Miami some cap space as a result of opting out of his contract. But if you can get anything back, a pick or a couple of picks, or even a player that might wind up being serviceable for a short term, I think that's a great return. So yeah, I'm okay with it. It's never going to feel like a fair value, but it's one you can accept and be confident that Miami is working towards some kind of a plan to continue to improve their roster.
If you have that salary cap relief, you get a couple of role players, a role player back, and the peace of mind that you've moved past this situation that has been created by both parties, everybody involved here, but the peace of mind that you can move past this awkward phase of this chapter, that to me is good enough. And Pat Riley and the rest of this organization has to realize you are not getting that star player back anymore. Like, that star return is off the table. And hoping and wishing that something else shakes loose between now and the trade deadline. They've been hoping and wishing as a strategy for 3 years now, and it hasn't worked. Hoping and wishing is, you got to take action now. And if part of that is just, honestly, addition by subtraction, this awkward situation created by everybody involved, you got to get rid of it. You got to move on. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.